that next handhold and that next lift.
Boy, I mean, as a sports fan, I could see this like on an NFL helmet, right? Just participating in a pro football game.
Exactly right. You want to see what the linebacker sees, or more important, probably because he's going to see more action, what the quarterback sees. Yeah. And you can get the sense of, holy crap, you look around and say, geez, he's about to get sacked, and the quarterback, you'd see some of the quarterbacks themselves wouldn't see.
Right. Especially 360, you'd be yelling, blindside, blindside,
right?
At your TV. Right. We're speaking with tech analyst Rob Enderle, principal and founder of the Enderle Group. He's written a fascinating piece about 5G. But where does it go from there?
Well, pretty much anywhere you want. I mean, if you think about it, if you can have any amount of performance that you need on any device that you have, as long as it's connected wirelessly on 5G, then your imagination is your limitation. The VR, AR, you can game from anywhere with anything. We mentioned telepresence with regard to the mountain climber. Well, how about just telepresence with just hanging out with your kids if you're traveling overseas? It's those kinds of things that now become viable, and because of low latency, a lot less annoying than what we've got right now. So that you get better bandwidth, better performance, higher visual acuity. And none of that hesitation and talk over that you typically get on a traditional phone or even a traditional digital line.
Thanks, Rob. It's tech analyst Rob Enderle, principal and founder of the technology advisory firm called the Enderle Group. It is 30 minutes now after the hour on This Weekend. You don't often find the words business and friendly in the same sentence, let alone the same state, unless, of course, you're talking about Michigan. Michigan's business-friendly practices help them become a leader in industries that range from agriculture and cybersecurity to aerospace and advanced manufacturing. In fact, Michigan is ranked among the top 10 states for major new and expanded facilities, which makes Michigan more than business-friendly. It makes Michigan business-smart. To learn more, visit michiganbusiness.org. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us. Gordon Deal with Jennifer Kashenka. Coming up this half hour, the new economic worry. Also, how to stop apps from tracking you, and the most absurd college football bowl games. That story in about 20 minutes. Time for a business update, and it's brought to you by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. When a state ranks among the top 10 in the country for major new and expanded facilities, that's pure growth. When it's tops for 4 straight years, that's pure Michigan. Contact michiganbusiness.org. Year-end holiday giving is make or break time for America's charitable sector. Donors who give now may feel compelled by the spirit of the season, but many of them also know that they can soon write off their gifts on their taxes and recoup a portion of their money. But the tax incentive affects fewer people this year, thanks to a provision in the new tax law. Nonetheless, American generosity appears to be a more powerful force than economic incentive. In fact, giving is on the rise. Here's Sean Zeller, deputy editor at Roll Call. Sean, what's up here?
Well, it's really interesting. The tax law, if you'll recall, that was enacted at the end of 2017, a year ago, increased the standard deduction. It roughly doubled it, which means that about 31 million households that used to itemize their taxes and deduct from their income anything they gave to charity will no longer find it beneficial to itemize. They'll take that standard deduction, and they'll have no tax incentive to give to charity. So charities were alarmed about this, and they thought that their giving would decrease. It made good sense. But what they didn't consider is that the tax law was also very beneficial for people at the top of the income scale who will continue to itemize their taxes. And so what has happened is as a report has come out covering the first 3 quarters of 2018 by a fundraising professional group and a think tank here in Washington, the Urban Institute. And it's found that big donors are giving so much more this year that it's making up for a drop in small donations from people who are presumably losing the ability to itemize.
Wow. What are those numbers like, the small donors versus big donors, in terms of percentages, lost or gained by charities?
It's a small reduction from small donors, which we define as people under $250, as well as mid-sized donors, people giving $250 to $1,000. And those are down about 4%. But it's made up for by a little increase in those big donors, people giving more than $1,000. And in fact, we're finding that as of the end of September, fundraising is a bit ahead of the pace that it set through the first 3 quarters of 2017. It's at about 60% of the 2017 total already. Now, of course, 60% through 3 quarters doesn't sound good, but most donating happens in this final quarter around the holidays. And so if holiday giving is as strong as it's always been in the past, this should be a blockbuster year for charities.
Wow. We're speaking with Sean Zeller, deputy editor at Roll Call. His piece is called Charities Feeling Flush Despite Tax Law Change. I guess the question becomes, can they sustain this momentum?
Yeah, I mean, the charities still say they're worried because they're worried about, now they're talking about civic engagement. If the number of overall donors is down, if you lose one big donor, it could be more devastating for a charity. And they also say that donating and volunteering often go hand in hand. So if fewer people are donating, they're worried that it will also lead to a reduction in the people giving their time.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Wow. The charity law the charity deduction law that was proposed, right? It was Congressman Chris Smith from New Jersey, Henry Cuellar from Texas. What happens to that now?
Yeah, those congressmen, concerned by what the charities said at the end of 2017, concerned that they would take a hit because of the tax law changes, proposed a law that would allow every American to deduct from their income at tax time anything they give to charity, making it an above-the-line deduction open to anyone. I think the case for that is not as good as it was. I mean, with charities getting more money in 2018, it's hard to argue that they're suffering in any way. And the Smith-Cuellar law would, mean a big hit to the Treasury. It would mean a lot of people would be able to deduct more from their taxes, be paying less in taxes.
Thanks, Sean. Sean Zeller, deputy editor at Roll Call. It's 20 minutes now in front of the hour on This Weekend. Thanks for being with us. Will the economy weaken? The financial markets appear to think so. The stock and bond markets are suggesting that a recession could be in the offing. If the economy does indeed weaken, the big worry for many families won't be the stock market. Instead, the top concern for most Americans will be the job market. More on preparing for a job market downturn from personal finance expert Jonathan Clements at humbledollar.com. Jonathan, how do you see things?
So if you went back a year ago, we had a number of things going on. One, we had the stock market very richly valued. Two, we had very low bond yields. And three, we had just passed a new tax law. And under that new tax law, not only was the standard deduction much higher, but also itemized deductions were limited, in particular the deduction for state and local and property taxes. Put it all together, and it struck me that for 2018, the really smart move was to pay down debt. And, what can I say? You get lucky once in a while. It turned out to be pretty good advice. This year we've seen bonds go down, we've seen stocks going down. So paying down debt would have been a really smart move in 2018. Looking ahead to 2019, I'm not nearly as concerned about the stock market, but thanks to the great improvement in earnings we've seen in 2018, largely because of those tax cuts, earnings are much improved, which means the stock market valuations look much better than they did a year ago. So instead of worrying about the stock market, at this point, I'm worrying about the job market.
Okay, and your worries here are why?
So when you look at the financial markets, we've got stocks going down over the last couple of months. We've seen bond yields falling at the long end of the curve. And put those two together, and what the markets are telling us is that there is a risk of recession. Now, if there's a recession, it probably won't be good for stocks. But most people don't own stocks. Something like half of all Americans have no exposure to the stock market, but they have a lot of exposure to the job market. Yeah. If we get a recession and people are out of work, that's going to mean a big financial hit for the average American family. And that's why I say in this article, what you should be focusing on now is getting your finances in shape in case we do indeed get a recession.
Okay. How do we begin to do that?
Well, the obvious move is to build up an emergency fund, to have some cash on hand in case you end up out of work. We've all seen that Federal Reserve statistic that shows that half of all Americans couldn't come up with $400 to cover a financial emergency. That's a pretty horrifying state of affairs. But simply stockpiling cash in case you lose your job isn't the only thing that you should be doing. One of the other top priorities, and this makes sense no matter what happens to the job market, one of your other top priorities should be paying off credit card debt.
We're speaking with Jonathan Clements, personal finance expert, also editor and founder of HumbleDollar.com. And he's talking about getting yourself prepared in case there's a downturn in the job market. What about with regards to 401ks?
So here's a piece of advice that may sound a little odd, but if you think you're going to get laid off and you work for an employer that has a matching contribution that vests immediately. In other words, if you put $100 in, maybe they may give you a matching contribution of $50, and that $50 goes into your account right away. You should actually keep funding your 401k even if you're worried about getting laid off. And the reason is this. If you get laid off and you have to dip into your 401k, yes, you'll have to pay income taxes and tax penalties on that money, but the matching contribution, if it vests immediately, will more than compensate for the tax penalties you end up paying. So if you think you're going to get laid off, but that matching contribution vests immediately, keep putting money in that 401k because it will work out better in the long run.
Thanks, Jonathan. Jonathan Clements at HumbleDollar.com. 13 minutes now in front of the hour on This Weekend. Thanks for being with us. The apps on your phone are tracking you when you go to places like the grocery store. Security experts have long expected various companies track users through apps, but recent investigations have shown how invasive these practices are. Recently, the New York Times purchased anonymized data from a third-party vendor, de-anonymized it, and used it to show how companies track people throughout their days. More from MarketWatch reporter Carrie Paul. Carrie, what do we have?
Right, so this is prompted by a couple of new reports from the New York Times and the Associated Press in the past year that have shown just how invasive some of these apps' location tracking is. We've long suspected that apps kind of keep an eye on where we're going, but this is kind of putting it in clear view just how much they know about us.
How so? Can you quantify that in some way?
Yeah, so a lot of data companies say that it's no big deal that they keep location data on people because it's anonymized, but what we know from a lot of different studies is that data can be easily de-anonymized with just a couple points. So if someone knows your first name or your last name or where you live, they can easily track down exactly who you are and what this data means.
Jeez. And the threat there is what? That someone could steal your identity, perhaps, your critical personal information like a bank account number?
Yeah, there's a number of threats. Obviously, there's just the creepiness factor that these companies know that you're going to a doctor's appointment for an hour and then going back to work. But obviously, if that information was to fall into the wrong hands, that could put you in danger, whether it's your bank account or just someone knowing what your habits are when you're home and when you're not home. That could put you in physical danger as well.
Jeez, right. What jumped out at me, too, in your story was that you said even sometimes when your apps are turned off in terms of location services, you're still being tracked somehow.
Yeah, it's difficult to see exactly which apps collect which data unless you're really closely reading the privacy policies, which obviously we suggest everyone do, but it is hard to do that when you have a lot of apps on your phone.
Yeah, boy, oh boy. What can we do as consumers to better protect ourselves?
Obviously, there's the nuclear option of just deleting all your apps and throwing your phone away. Just kidding. But some people have suggested deleting any apps that you don't necessarily need.
We're speaking with Carrie Paul, personal finance reporter at MarketWatch. Her piece is called Your Apps Are Tracking You. Here's how to stop them. What else do you recommend here?
Well, one security expert I spoke to said that it's really important to look at what the purpose of an app is. For example, if you have a paid service, like your banking service or something like that, which I'm not saying banks don't collect data on you because they certainly do, but if you have a paid service and your app is just an extension of that, it's probably less likely to be collecting and monetizing data on you, so just keep that in mind. You're probably better off using a paid app than one of the free apps.
Thanks, Carrie. MarketWatch reporter Carrie Paul. It is 6 minutes now in front of the hour on This Weekend. It's college football bowl season. Seems nearly every team is invited to one these days. That's why 538.com put together a list of the most absurd bowl games using a math system that uses absurdity points based on criteria like the length of the name, bad teams, lack of defense, free